Agencies Drinking Beers brought to you by Proposify, software that helps you deliver beautiful proposals in the cloud and close more deals.
My name is Kyle Racky, and I have a special co-host here today by the name of Patrick Edmonds.
Woo!
But we actually have a really good interview coming up with the founder of Crayon.io.
.co.
.co. I'm glad you remember that. But before we get into that, so we're going to be talking about competition, which everybody has. Everybody's got competition.
If you don't, then good for you.
There's a problem. No, I wouldn't say good for you.
Oh?
I used to always do that at. Actually, I think I talked about this on the show. But when you're talking to a client, you go, "Who's your competition?" Oh, we don't have any. I don't know why people choose to delude themselves into believing they don't. But anyway, before we get into that, just going to go over a blog post that I wrote last week called 9 Ways to Use Sales Psychology to Close More Deals.
Very cool.
I believe you manipulated the headline on that one.
Maybe. I manipulate every headline.
Yeah. So Patrick is the resident growth marketer here at Proposify.
Hacker.
Growth hacker. And you always optimize our headlines to be more search friendly.
Yeah, Jen's the podcast listeners know who Jen is. So
I think so.
Jen and I work fairly closely to find that fine line between what will rank in search results and what you guys will actually, the listeners will click on in your email.
What the humans like.
What the humans like and what the robots like. There's a fine balance there.
Yes. So this one we're talking about sales psychology, which I find very interesting. I have to admit, I stole pretty much most of the, where I found the research and whatnot was from Cognitive Load, which people should check out. It's called CogLode, COGLODE.com. It was actually made by an agent, like a web app agency or a design agency out of the UK, who we actually had on the show in the very early days, called Rebo. And I remembered seeing that, and then I was going to write a blog post on sales psychology, and I thought I would look at that and found some cool little gems. So let's talk about some of those gems. I'll maybe not go through them all, but some of the kind of cool ones. Maybe I'll start with my favorite, and then Patrick, if you want to tell me one that you found interesting. It was the sunk cost effect. So where we don't want to pull out of something that we've already put effort into.
Oh, yeah.
We actually we were just kind of talking earlier, right before we recorded this, about social sign-in on the Proposify site. So I thought when we launched this, which would have been earlier this year, I thought that if it was easier for people to create a free trial, if they didn't have to enter as many form fields, then we would get more of them doing that. But I figured everything else would stay the same. And what we actually found, what you found looking through the data was what?
That those people were less likely to come back. And our growth kind of continued stable. Everything did go up after that, but it probably would have gone up anyway. And that those people using the social sign-in were a little bit less likely to continue through.
Yeah. And we're not 100% sure why that is. We think some may have technical issues logging back in. But, I mean, one, I guess, explanation for that is that when you fill out a slightly longer form and put more information in it, even though less people may do that, less people may fill out that form, the ones that do have invested a bit more time into it. And so the research suggests that, they feel more invested in it because they put the time into it.
Oh, yeah. I've done the same thing. Anything with historical data, like we have analytics partners and things that we use, and after that data is there in the software, if you continue to pay for it month over month over month, it almost becomes more valuable to you the longer that you've had it, which is really good for those companies. Anyone who's in analytics or is storing some type of data information for somebody that you can't export or you can't port to another platform, that's going to keep people around because they're not going to want to lose that sunk cost of paying for it and then having that data for the past year or two or whatever it might be.
Mm-hmm. And I've also used this example for agencies when they're pitching clients, because some agencies kind of think like the more proposals you spit out and the quicker you spit them out, the more deals you get, which can be true. And I suppose it's in our best interests to say that that is true because
definitely true.
We make software that makes proposal writing faster. But in reality, if you send a proposal to an unqualified lead, they have a much lower likelihood of actually buying. So somebody calls you up and says, hey, I want your agency to build me a website. And you ask a few questions and then 20 minutes later spit out a proposal. I mean, you're not going to close that. You're not as likely to close that as you would be if you made the client work for it a little bit up front and say, okay, well, we're going to, have a half-hour call just to discuss your needs, and then we need you to kind of give us certain information or maybe fill out like a form or a questionnaire or a Word document just to, fill in more details.
Learn more about you. Also good for sales anyway.
Yeah. And then we're going to pitch you the proposal. So now you have to block off an hour or two and any other decision makers, and they're going to watch our pitch. And then you can get the proposal.
They've already invested that time.
Yeah.
And if it's a good proposal anyway, then...
Well, yeah, if it's a shitty proposal or if the budget's way off or something, obviously. But if they've sunk time into it, they're less likely to, they're serious, right?
Yeah, they won't blow you off.
So that's a very very flexible, I don't know what you call it, psychological effect.
Yeah. One I liked in your post, and you actually got a comment about it, was around pricing preference. The 99-cent kind of big box store, Walmart, whatever you want to call it, idea versus round pricing, having things on the dollar, $100 or $50 or whatever, something that's easier to consume. I have nothing to back this up, but I'd say that it has something to do with the scale of what that is, and also retail versus some other, like if you're pitching a big, large thing, no one's going to care about the cents anyway because who cares?
They're not really buying it.
Or even the 49 versus 50. But if you're buying a Snickers, maybe
$3.99 seems like it's sort of like $3 and not $4.
Yeah, but $399,000. Why? Like, why wouldn't you just call that?
Yeah, 4,000. Yeah. But I mean, on Proposify, I have tested this in the past. Now, mind you, this was a year or more ago, but I have run A/B tests on our pricing page, and the only thing I was really testing was, do we get more people signing up for a trial from the pricing page? So that was sort of the success metric I was using. But even still, I don't remember what the exact numbers were. I think historically it's probably in VWO, Visual Website Optimizer. But I mean, it wasn't even close. The $25, $50, $100 pricing converted way higher than, $24, $49, $99. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I guess
the data told us there, I guess.
The data told us, and so did the Journal of Economic Psychology in 2013. Do consumers prefer round prices? So if you visit this blog article, you'll actually see we've sourced where you can actually find the research that was done for each of these different psychological effects. What are some other kind of cool ones? Well, I mean, anchoring bias, I think, is pretty well known, but maybe not, is the idea that the first price, when you hear a price at the beginning, or whatever the first price you hear, is sort of that anchors how much something is worth in your mind, and then if you lower it, then that seems that much cheaper, even if the whole idea is you were only going to sell it for the smaller price anyway.
That's why you see SaaS pages will have the one in the middle, the price in the middle is kind of larger.
Yeah.
And brought in the middle, and they have a cheaper option, a more expensive option. They really want you to go with that one in the middle that's kind of blown up.
Yeah.
Visually.
Well, I think they do want you to go with the bigger one.
They will, yeah, but I'd say the more of their customers probably pick that big option.
Yeah, I think we've noticed a difference when we launched the Trenta plan that was like $3,000. I think it might have had some effect on like getting more grandes, more $50, $100 plans.
Yeah,
I don't know.
One thing I thought about that too, for agencies, I don't know how many times agencies ever give multiple pricing options. I'm come from a media kind of background where the client would give you a bigger budget, and we're spending 100% of that media budget on the media, and then there's some fee associated for management with that. But how many times does an agency really come back and say, okay, here's your small, medium, and large options. What are you going to get for that?
Yeah, I think more of them should do it, to be honest, because oftentimes the client, they may have a budget in mind, but they don't necessarily want to spend it all up front, or maybe what you pitch them doesn't offer enough functionality or enough value, and they actually want to pay a little bit more to get more. So I think you're right that a lot of agencies just kind of look at their pricing page as one number. They might have different line items, but it all adds up to one number. And they should try offering some different tiers, or at least have a backup one so they can say, here's what we recommend and here's how much it costs. And the client goes, ooh, that's more than I wanted to spend. You go like, okay, well, we actually have option B, which is a little less, but it's this much.
Yeah. Jen quoted you in her most recent blog post too about trying to get pricing from clients.
Yeah.
I can build you a rowboat or an ocean liner. Both will be seaworthy, but budget determines which one you get. I like that quote.
Yeah, I liked it. I stole that from someone else.
Stole it, okay. I'll attribute it to you and someone else.
Oh, I'm taking total credit for it now. But I found that years and years ago. But I always liked it because clients don't want to tell you their budget. And so it's easy to say, oh, well, you always find out what your client's budget is. But sometimes they just won't tell you. They'll be like, oh, well, we prefer to not say. Or, oh, we don't know how much it'll cost. That's why we're coming to you. But you have to get it from them somehow. So that's why if you kind of put your cards out first and go, okay, so we'll assume your budget's around $100K then you'll see, oh, well, no, that's not exactly. Yeah. Little Jedi mind tricks. What else was there? There was the nostalgia effect, which I thought was kind of cool.
Yeah, nostalgia is I think a lot of people understand nostalgia. I don't think it's that hard to wrap your head around that people are, oh, I really like that because of what I did back in the day.
No, but I think what is interesting about this effect is that it actually, people value money less when they feel nostalgia. So basically there was this research done. It was the Journal of Consumer Research in 2014. I've got it sourced here in the article. And it was called Nostalgia Weakens the Desire for Money. So essentially, if you feel nostalgia, you feel more socially connected to people around you.
And willing to drop more dollars.
Well, it's not even that. It's just that when you feel socially connected, you feel like your desire to hold on to money weakens. And I think somewhere in the article it was like they were using the example of in There Will Be Blood, the movie with Daniel Day-Lewis. He's the lonely, corrupt old man in his mansion, and he's completely destroyed every relationship around him, and but he's got his money, so it's sort of that's just one example, but this idea that when you feel very connected to people around you, you put less of a value on money. So essentially you make somebody feel nostalgic, they'll feel more socially connected. You do that. So there's kind of different applications for this. But I remember when, I use the example of the Mad Men carousel scene. For anybody who's seen Mad Men, I assume most people have. There's this great speech in it from Don Draper talking about, nostalgia and what it does. And then, they rename whatever that Kodak thing was to the carousel. I don't know. If you haven't seen it, check it out. The video's in there. It's kind of cool. That's all I have to say. How about you, Patrick? You're done?
I'm good. No, I just want to say it was a good blog post you had there. I recommend everybody go and take a watch. That's not the right word.
A read?
A read.
Yeah. Well, only got 20 shares so far, so I'm a little disappointed. It hasn't been performing the way.
Well, let's see what our podcast listeners can do to that.
Just drive it up. Cool. So now we're going to talk about competition, which is timely because we just had one of our competitors slam us on a recent blog post.
Slam us.
Well, they did on Twitter, remember? They said Proposify got you down.
Go and check them out.
Got us all riled up. So competition, that's what we're going to talk about with Jonah Lopin from Crayon.co. Would you do the honors, Patrick?
Now let's move on to the interview with Jonah Lopin.
I'd like to introduce Jonah Lopin to the show today. Jonah was formerly the VP of Customer Success at HubSpot, but for the past couple of years has been the founder of Crayon.co, which is a competitive marketing intelligence platform. And we're happy to have on the show today. Welcome, Jonah.
Thanks. Yeah, it's great to be here.
Very excited to chat with you. I think our listeners always like hearing from people who, started SaaS products and started a startup, not necessarily in an agency, but I think what you guys are doing is very applicable to agency owners, especially ones who run digital marketing agencies. So one thing I want to know, Jonah, is I guess I know there's been a bit of an evolution with Crayon in terms of what you originally had envisioned it doing and kind of where you've pivoted a little bit to. Can you talk about that at all and sort of the reason behind the transition?
Yeah, so let's see. So here's the thesis behind Crayon is that lots of marketing teams today really, really understand their own funnels and their own metrics. Like most marketing teams, and I bet, and probably lots of your listeners, whether they're like, thinking about an agency that they run or thinking about their own company, lots of marketing teams really understand their own internal metrics. When it comes to, it's like, okay, how much traffic did we get to the website last month? How much of our traffic is organic versus paid? What's our best performing landing page, et cetera. Most marketing teams have, and they've got like products like HubSpot or Salesforce.com or these like mature products that help them understand that. But lots of those same marketing teams, when it comes to understanding what's happening outside the four walls of their company, when it comes to understanding what's happening in the market or what's happening with competitors, partners, customers, lots of people have sort of poor visibility into what's happening. They lack the data that can help them get an advantage. So the thesis behind Crayon is let's pull everything together that marketing teams need to understand the external environment, help them ingest data from the external environment so that they can do marketing and sales more effectively. And when we started the company, we had that kind of core thesis, which grew out of, like at HubSpot, we had, like I said earlier, it's like tens of thousands of customers who had signed up. And the observation there was that they didn't always do a great job of leveraging data from outside of their company. So we had that core idea, but we were initially much more design focused in our thinking in terms of we were helping marketing teams look externally for kind of design benchmarks and inspiration around web design or landing page design. So we sort of started with this design focus, and we've shifted to be much more broad in the types of data that we now help customers sort of understand everything from pricing and packaging as it changes in their competitive set to different reviews and all the content being published by those companies, positions they're hiring for, changes to their products, et cetera. So we've really broadened out much beyond design.
One thing I kind of wanted to get your perspective on was that, you hear a lot of talk now, just, in general on social media and whatnot. You post those memes. I think of the one of Michael Phelps, the Olympic swimmer, and he's sort of like head forward focused on swimming, and somebody next to him is like kind of looking at him. And so I think the takeaway there is like, don't kind of look at your competition too much, stay kind of focused on your own game. And like what obviously you would probably make a strong case for, looking at keeping an eye on competition. I guess, like, where do you kind of strike that balance? Is it possible to be too focused on competition to the point where, your people are just sort of obsessing about what their competitors are doing? Or do you think there's kind of a happy medium where, other people are just not focusing enough on their competition?
Yeah, it's a good question. So first of all, I think it's probably possible to be too focused on almost anything. right? It's like there's people who are obsessed with like how many Twitter followers they have or whatever. It's like, okay, you're too obsessed with that, dude. It doesn't matter, but like you're putting an outsized kind of importance on that metric or some other metric or topic. So and that's like a human flaw probably, and true in marketing or running a company. But so yeah, it's probably possible to be too focused on the competition, but that's probably just kind of a general truth. When I think about the Michael Phelps thing, and we had a similar. There's an attitude out there that definitely says like, well, we're the market leader. Let's not focus on the competition. Here's the issue, though, is that like so I was a physics major in my undergrad education, and in a lot of kind of physics problems, we think about a purely idealized like vacuum in which like these experiments can happen, or in which these laws of nature are really, really perfect and pure, but then let the engineers worry about, but in real life it works like this. And I think that's true in marketing, is like, look, the reality is if you were the only person in your market, then your prospects would only be hearing your message. They would be only like responding to your campaigns. They'd be deciding, in terms of your product based on its merits or whatever. But the reality is, for most of us, is that we're not alone in our market. Like lots of our sales situations are competitive sales situations. There's lots of other people putting marketing out there, be it in your content marketing or in a sales process. And so your marketing doesn't operate in a vacuum. And so you sort of have to understand what the competition is doing and saying, because your prospects are not, they're operating in a context where they're going to be engaging with the competition and not just with you. So it's pretty critical. I would argue, unless you're doing something so specialized that there's no one else in your market. But for most of us, it's pretty important to understand what the competition is saying and doing.
Yeah. Oh no, that's a good. I think that's a good argument for it, and I actually I do agree with that. I think one thing that I remember from, especially when I was running an agency, was when I would talk to new clients or people that I was trying to sell our services, and you kind of do your general questions that you ask new prospects or new clients, which is like, what's your value proposition, who are your competitors. And I always noticed that when you got to the who are your competitors part, every client would say they don't have any competitors, which was always just blew my mind. Like they would all just almost like head in the sand approach of like, no, yeah, what we're doing is so specialized, there's nothing like it. And I remember, like, even for our own product, even if there wasn't a single proposal app in the world or anybody else doing proposal software, there's still like the alternative to what your product is, which would be like Word or InDesign or everybody, spreadsheets. People have all these different ways of hacking together problems, but essentially at the end of the day, everybody has competition, and it's helpful to know what they're doing, right?
For sure. Yeah. I mean, I think that makes sense. And it's for most teams and most companies, there's lots of advantage to understanding your competitive set. And so like we've got, for instance, we have agencies like marketing agencies who use Crayon, where some of them are thinking about like, okay, here's the 5 or 7 agencies that we see like either in our local market, or like here's who we're up against in terms of deals. And it's not that we want to copy them, but we want to understand like if they're shifting their mix of services, or they're changing their pricing, or they're talking about themselves in a different way, or what is it about their marketing? Like, what are they doing that's winning them clients, and what can we learn from that? And it's an input. It's an important input, I would argue. And the same is true for most companies. Is like, whether you're out to win more competitive sales, like increase your win rate in competitive sales situations, or you're out to get more out of your content marketing. Like most teams are investing in content marketing these days, and you can't do well in content marketing if you're not differentiated relative to the competition. So what the competition is doing and saying it's hard to argue is not like a critical input in terms of getting your content marketing right. But yeah, for most teams, I think there's good ROI there, which probably goes without saying, since that's the company we're building.
You need to know what the conversation is before you can join in on the conversation in terms of content marketing.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it starts there. Is like these days, like in the early HubSpot days, like back in 2006, 2007, there actually was lots and lots of white space in terms of content marketing. Like almost any topic you could think of, you could get out and write a blog article, and it would be an original idea because we were new to the idea of like putting a lot of this content out there. But these days, most content marketing teams don't have that luxury because lots of topics, there's a conversation happening already about most topics. And so, yeah, just in terms of like researching a topic and getting out there and saying like, what's been done around this topic, what's the conversation around this topic, helps you not, duplicate what's been said, but really helps you, if you're smart, helps you identify the things that haven't been talked about, the places where you can really be original relative to your competitive set. And that's where you get outsized return, in content marketing.
Do you think that, I mean, speaking of content marketing and what you just said do you think the usefulness of getting the most from content marketing is where you figure out, like what you just said, where there's a hole, this thing hasn't been discussed, so this is where we can, come in and sort of fill the gap, or more of like what they call, I think in SEO, is like the skyscraper technique, where it's you find a blog post that ranks highly and then just write a better blog post, write something more in depth, more, have more meat to it, so it kind of eventually Google ranks it higher? Or do you think both approaches are kind of a good way to use that competitive analysis?
I think both of those approaches are sort of facets of the same core idea. The core idea being, if you're not doing something truly remarkable with your content, you're unlikely to get really, really good ROI on that effort. I think the fact is, today with content marketing, is like you can get, it's almost like anything else. It's think about events or paid search advertising or PR. Is you can do a mediocre job and you're going to get some return. Like you'll probably get some clients from it. You'll get some traffic from it. It's like these things work even when done poorly. But if you really want to get outsized return, like you want something that's going to change your business, like you want to get 10 times the traffic in a year, you want to get 10 times the leads, and you want to break out, then you have to be excellent. And in content marketing, I think what that means is you have to produce remarkable, interesting, unique content, and that's increasingly hard to do. Just because there's so much noise out there, there's so many teams and so many people investing and putting content out. And so I think whether you think of it in terms of building, like taking a topic that's been talked about and building this like Uber resource the best, or finding a content that's a topic that's never been talked about and focusing on that. I think the key is like across your competitive set, depending, like if it's ebooks or webinars or white papers or blog articles or videos or whatever the format is, like what's the topics and what are the formats where there's an opportunity to do something that's like really different and legitimately better. And then that's where you want to focus. And it can be really time consuming for teams to go out and try to figure that out. I mean, if you're an agency and you're working with a client around their content strategy, or you're a team that's, wants to go out and do this stuff, it's increasingly difficult because most teams are publishing on Medium, they're doing stuff on YouTube and Vimeo and Prezi, or they're doing they're doing a podcast like you guys, they've got their blog, they've got resources on their website, and just trying to pull all that together across your competitive set and then search and understand really by topic what's happening is hard. But if you can do it, there's an answer there that says here's where we should focus, and that you can really help you get good results.
Yeah, marketing teams have such limited resources these days too that they want to invest in something that they're a little bit more confident that will perform well for them. So if they have that data that says, okay, maybe this is where I should be putting my effort in instead of maybe directly copying my competitors, but finding whatever that little piece or niche is that I might be able to outperform them, they can get a little bit more bang for their buck with their limited resources as a marketing team.
Mm. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
and
mean, there's.
I think that's
Sorry,
right. And over time, those small improvements can pay off. It's if you, yeah, I think a lot of like getting long-term good results in marketing is like just making slightly smarter decisions like all the time. Is like running slightly better experiments, slightly better decisions, and over time those things compound, and then a year out, 2 years out, 3 years out, you're really in a different place than you would have been otherwise.
Well, I wanted to ask you about that, Jonah, about sort of the idea of experimenting with content marketing, because I think marketers are pretty, in general, pretty savvy when it comes to experimenting in general. So I think, especially the tools out there nowadays like Optimizely and, other sort of A/B testing software has made it really easy to run experiments. I've, just sort of in my own personal experience, I haven't seen it as much in content marketing, like true experimentation, because so much of it is so, I'm almost like touchy feely and hard to really measure, the effect of like, did that blog post really convert, or, did that whatever video or podcast like this, it's kind of hard to know if it really works. So, like, are there any sort of tips or ideas you have in mind that can help people actually experiment with content marketing?
Yeah, for sure. So I think I would argue, so Optimizely is interesting. I think I would argue that knowing which experiments to run is probably more valuable than having the tools and the framework to actually run that test. It's like, what should you be testing is probably more important than how you test it. Is harder, and so it's nothing against Optimizely. I'm big fans of those guys, but I think yeah, it's harder to think through like what should we actually test than it is to do the test itself. And so in content marketing, so here's the issue with content marketing is that and most content marketing teams fall into this trap around linear growth, where so most, you think about, most agencies out there, most small, medium-sized businesses, they don't have enough traffic such that linear growth is going to get them anywhere too interesting in the next year. So like for most teams, the only way they're really going to get 10x the traffic is if they can break that cycle of linear growth, if they can figure out, they do something that really, really works much better than anything that they've ever tried before. And so then the question becomes, yeah, but what experiments should we run? And so you have to ask yourself, are we placing any bets as a team, around content or in our marketing? Are we placing any bets that have the potential to get us 10x the traffic, like to really break out? And so it's not necessarily like a kind of a micro test, like an A/B test, but it's more, maybe having, meetup groups in person in local cities. That's what's really going to take off. Or maybe it's we've never done webinars and that format's really going to work for us. Or there's some topic that you've never broached, but you think you could handle in a really interesting way that could really break out relative to your market and really do well for you. So the idea is to think about, look across your competitive set is one pretty interesting place to get ideas for what might be working in your market. But you've got to ask yourself, like, where can we place bets that have the potential to be big? That's how I think about it.
Yeah, that all makes sense. Do you think that sometimes people are too quick to jump on what competitors are doing when they realize that there may not even be any evidence that it actually works? Like I've kind of seen in the past maybe things that we've done that were really experiments, and then we've seen a competitor kind of copy it, and we're like, why did they copy that? That,
Right.
that didn't even work for us, and they just kind of blindly copied it. Is there any sort of way around that?
Well, I mean, I'm a strong believer in the school of thought that says that what works for somebody else might not work for you, and vice versa. So what's funny is, like, you guys might have tried something that didn't work for you, and then somebody else picked up on it. It might actually be working for them. So you guys should probably circle back around and see which of those things have really caught on, and then maybe you try those again. But we get that a lot, though, and it's not. So it doesn't mean that you want to kind of blindly get out and copy what the competition is doing, and it definitely doesn't mean that what they're doing is even the right thing to be doing. But it fills out kind of a set of possibilities for a team in a really efficient way that says, here's like the superset of experiments that we should be considering. And if someone who you respect, if someone smart, and look, if you guys, if I competed with Proposify, and I'm glad that I don't, you guys are very sharp. But if I did, and you guys tried something, I would say we should think about that. Doesn't mean we should go off and do it, but we should think about, why are the Proposify guys doing that? Is that something that we've ever tested? Do we think they're onto an interesting idea, but they didn't do it right? We should try it over here, or try it over there. We want to tweak it. But it's a very efficient way to kind of see the superset of experiments you might want to run, by kind of seeing what's happening in your competitive set.
Yeah, so your point is the team still needs to make the decision for themselves, what's working for you and what's not working for you. Whether they see that information or not, it's up to them to make their decisions for their company.
That's right. Yeah, that's the way to think about it.
As an aside, as we're talking about competition, I remember I was talking to another local startup founder, and he basically was building, and it got acquired about 2 years ago by a large company, but he was basically building like an in the browser coding editor. And he said that he actually used to have like monthly or quarterly phone calls with all of his competitors. Like they would all actually get on a conference call together. Everybody who was, were like a group of people who were building the same type of thing, and they would actually talk. And I thought that was pretty fascinating, because I couldn't imagine doing it with our competitors. I don't know. Do we think about competitors maybe too sort of aggressively, or should we be more cooperative with them?
I think it just so much depends, on the dynamics in your space and your market. But we definitely see, a lot of our customers, especially at larger companies that are in more mature markets, there's a sort of a range, kind of a continuum between, between pure competitors and then what are actually more like partners and possibly customers. And there's people who are sort of in between. There's co-opetition in there between companies in the same space, and a lot of times they partner on one thing and they compete on something else, and then they're helping each other over here, and they're sort of fighting for talent, and so I think having some relationship can make sense, but it's pretty situation dependent. But that's an interesting example you mentioned. I would have liked to be a fly on the wall on those conference calls.
Yeah, absolutely. How transparent are they? Or, I guess everybody's still kind of keep their cards a bit close to their chest, which I remember a lot from the days running an agency where, we were pretty localized in terms of most of our clients were local. And so we considered local, web design marketing agencies our competition. And you'd, of course, always run into them at events and whatnot, and maybe even kind of be friends with some of them. But everybody always had that air of like secrecy, or just, when you ask how they're doing, everybody says, "Oh, we're slammed, we're busy, we've got so many clients." Yeah. And I think everybody gave the same answer, whether or not it was true.
Well, I think that, yeah, I definitely hear what you're saying, and I think that, and people's homepages often tell the same story too. Like, so there's what someone says in person, there's what they say on their homepage. But there's so much information online these days about agencies, companies, that if you look closely and you read the tea leaves, you can learn a lot about what what a company is doing and what they're up to, because there's feedback from folks they're interviewing on sites like Glassdoor. There's discussion sites like Quora and Reddit, and people are talking about them on there. They probably have a job board, and you can probably tell whether they're expanding their team, and if they are, and what roles, and how that's been changing, and what geographies are hiring. And then you can see as they're changing, their presence online and, across their whole digital footprint. There's a lot you can learn about what a company's up to, more and more every day as more information kind of migrates online. There's kind of a rich story that can be unearthed like programmatically by sort of scanning the web and pulling in data if you kind of know where to look.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, and obviously your product does that too. So everybody should check that out. One thing I just wanted to ask was, I think what you talked about a little bit earlier was it's not as important what tools you use as it is like having the right framework in mind or the way you think about what to experiment with. And I think that probably the same thing could be said with how do you use data. I think that's something that I've struggled with a lot in the past. Patrick here on our team is, amazing with data. And I think the thing that we always kind of come back to is, how, we can track anything pretty much, but how do you actually use it? So, I guess what I'm getting at in a roundabout way is we're getting pummeled with data nowadays. There's so many analytics tools and so many things that just feed us tons of data. But what's the right, I guess, framework for thinking about, what do you actually do with that data? Do you copy it? Like if Blockbuster knew that Netflix was around, they kind of knew what they were doing, but obviously they didn't build a better product or go online. There's a ton of opportunities missed because they let the competition just destroy them. How do we keep that from happening?
Yeah, I think I'm with you. Like I have this issue. Like there's lots of sources of data coming in, and like one of the things, and I think one of the things you have to think about is like how in each of these areas where you're rich with data, like be it around customer data, your CRM, or around marketing and analytics data, or any place where you've got lots of data, is like how are you getting insights from that data? Like how do you figure out what it means? How do you figure out what actions you should take? You literally just have data coming in and it's not yielding actions in your business, and it's not yielding experiments and tests and changes that are actually helping you get more leads, customers, whatever metrics you care about, then it's probably time to think about turning that source of data off. I would challenge you to think about if we can't draw actionable insights from it, then maybe the data is not valuable, at least wherever the business is today. So there's a couple of areas when you think about the actual sort of competitive set and data about your market and ways to make that actionable. One of the big ones is thinking about where is the competition investing from a product standpoint? What changes are they making? Where are they strong and weak relative to you? So from a product marketing standpoint, if you can understand relative strengths, that's very actionable, both because you want to shift your message over time to capitalize on the areas where you're strong and the competition's weak, and you want to steer clear or better yet, improve the product, improve yourself in the places where the competition has an advantage. But so it's a very actionable kind of tactical thing that you look for in the competitive intelligence data is around what are our areas of relative strength.
I appreciate you taking the time to be on the show. It was awesome having you, and loved you sharing your thoughts and opinions with us.
Yeah, my pleasure, Kyle, Patrick. Very much appreciated, and best of luck to you guys.
Thanks.
All right, thanks a lot.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Agencies Drinking Beer. If you enjoyed it, we'd appreciate it if you rate and or review us on the iTunes Store. If you have a story or lesson to share with other agency owners and managers from around the world, hit us up. Just email Kyle or Kevin at proposify.biz. And also, if you write business proposals and you want to make that process a whole lot easier and more streamlined, check out proposify.biz and sign up for a free 30-day trial. Cheers!